The belief of grooming gangs is that it happened 15, 20 years ago. That was just a northern mill town type thing, working class families up in the north. Vulnerable families were groomed, but I can sit here in January 2025 and categorically tell you that this is happening in southern towns. Guildford, Woking, Aldershot. These are towns that everybody around the country knows about. They're in the south of England. They're not northern mill towns. This, due to mass immigration of Muslim, mainly Pakistani men, will be happening in towns all over Britain where these people live. It's a horrific thing. People need to. They've got to start talking about it. We've got to get a grip of it. From what facts I've learned from people like the Maggie Oliver Foundation are that virtually every single Pakistani family in this country will know somebody or a member of their family will be involved in these gangs. But maybe it's time that some people came out and spoke out so we can root this evil out of our society. And this story begins in January 2021 when my daughter, 17-year-old daughter, attended a New Year's Eve party where she met a Somalian illegal immigrant that was in the UK, but was actually on police bail for child grooming and running child prostitution networks. This girl had conditions on her not to be out after 7 o'clock at night and also not to mix with under 18s. She latched onto my daughter, and this is where the grooming process began. We noticed things were different. She was going off she'd be in the house in the daytime. Obviously, been up very late the night before. If she came home, some days she'd disappear for 3 days on end. And in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, my wife would hear the door, my ex-wife, sorry, would hear the door go, the front door. She'd look out the window and be being picked up in a taxi by what looked like a Muslim taxi driver. So they were either from Woking or Aldershot. So, and then the behaviour was more erratic. My ex-wife said she was drinking lots, but she always seemed to have a lot of money. So I can't say what was happening with things, but the assumption is there that somebody that's not working, wasn't claiming benefits, had lots of money, was earning money elsewhere. A lot of this grooming stuff I know is mixed up with county line drug dealers. Pakistani men were hanging around the area in cars out at night. She could see them with bundles of money in their hand. And it was all getting too much. It's almost like you're living in a make-believe world that you know exists, but you don't want it to exist in your own world. It all stemmed from meeting this girl, but I think within 2 or 3 months, I think my daughter sort of herself wanted to pull away from this, and that was when the incident happened in Woking. My daughter had been chased through Woking by some Pakistani men, and they had a staffy dog with them. Chased her through Woking, and late at night, she knocked on her resident's door. Fortunately, in this modern life, the resident let her in and phoned the police because obviously she could see my daughter was very concerned. The first initial barrier we hit with the police was they weren't sure whether it would be a Hampshire case or a Surrey case because obviously she lived in Aldershot and the groomers came from Woking and Guildford area. They then decided it would be a Hampshire case. Now, the police were initially ran at my wife's house because she had been threatened by Pakistani Muslim men. If any of this came out, that things would happen. I mean, what things happen, I don't know. So the police were around there. Obviously, she had informed the police because she knew that this was a serious situation we're now in. The police said they would look into this, and they didn't seem very willing. This police officer just didn't seem very willing. He didn't really want to listen to the story. And I said that I would go and get some of my mates and we'd head off to Woking ourselves to find these people and we would sort them out if the police wouldn't sort them out. I think that's a natural reaction of a father. And straight away he jumped onto my back and said to me that now I'd made those allegations myself, that if anything happened to these Asian Pakistani men, that I would be in serious trouble, that the police would be now keeping an eye on me for making threats against people that had actually threatened my family. So I stood in the room with this policeman and he was saying, oh, well, this is young girl behaviour, she's 17, and I was trying to say to them that it should be a safeguarding thing because of her age, 17, and being autistic. that this is a safeguarding. I've since found out that up to the age of 18, it can still be classed as inappropriate relationships depending on age gap. So these men from Woking Guildford area were mid to late 30s, whereas my daughter was 17 at the time. So in my idea, that's an inappropriate age gap. Now, the police said to me that they didn't believe they could actually do anything about this because it was just her word against their word. So from straight away from the start, it seemed a whitewash. Police came to the conclusion that the best case they could do would be to do a case for stalking, which just seemed totally ridiculous. So they obviously hadn't taken this case seriously. They obviously didn't want to investigate it, and they just thought maybe to keep us quiet as a family and give them a warning, it would be just like a ticking off for stalking, which then would leave these perpetrators still roaming the streets of the local boroughs. Again, 3 or 4 weeks later, I got in touch with my ex-wife and to ask what was going on. And she actually informed me then that she'd just been told that the main perpetrator was now suffering mental health issues. Well, that's what we were told, to be fair, and that's obviously the normal narrative, that he was suffering mental health issues, and that safeguarding for him that they wouldn't be pursuing this case anymore because they didn't have the evidence, even though we'd given them a lot of evidence. I think there's various reasons why the police haven't helped. I think one is lack of funds. Two is they don't have the will, because they know it'd be a major thing in a town, and they would, once one door opens, another can of worms would open. I think that from higher above than the local police, they're told that this is something that we need to hide. We need to make it look like maybe we're doing something, and then say, well, we can't have the evidence. The CPS have not got enough evidence and things like this. So I don't believe the police want to cover things up, but I think they're virtually told to cover it up. My daughter, since those cases, has turned to she did a lot of self-harming. You know, the usual things you can see, all the self-harming where she'd cut herself up her arm. She started to drink very heavily, started to smoke a lot of weed, cannabis. Generally, the sort of thing where you know someone's life is perhaps spiraling on a downward spiral. I was very concerned about her. You obviously, as a parent, are concerned that your daughter is suffering depression, that they might do something stupid with their life. So this was going on for quite a while. The depression, lying in bed all day, drinking. This is the after effects of being groomed. The case has moved on. I mean, since then, my daughter's actually had a baby. Again, the person that she's had the baby with is someone that I suspect is involved in county line drug dealing. My daughter says he's a painter and decorator, but he's from London. He's Caribbean, and we're in a situation where he can't know where she lives because safeguarding again for her. So we've got another situation where I think it's possibly, I'm not 100% sure, could be still part of the grooming situation. The girl that groomed her, the Somalian, who was at the time on police bail, not allowed to mix with under 18s, not allowed out in the evening. Obviously met my daughter at a New Year's Eve party. The police seemed oblivious to the fact that she had broken all her bail conditions, this Somalian girl. She was, I believe, illegally trafficked into the UK herself, running these type of networks. She now, in a strange old world, lives 3 doors down from my daughter in the town my daughter lives in. My daughter, again, is having contact with her. So I pray that nothing's going on, but I would imagine that grooming is still continuing. I've talked to my daughter about it, and she says that this girl's her friend, and obviously that is the classic signs of grooming, to believe you're their friends. I mean, some of the cases I've heard and listened to other girls, even after the horrific abuse, they still think these people are their friends. It's a very warped situation. We as a family have been totally let down by the authorities, the police not wanting to investigate it, the local social services, total letdown. you feel like you're swimming against the tide as a parent. It's awful. You try to blank things out yourself. You actually don't want to think about it. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to think about it. That probably seems very strange to people that have never been involved in these situations. I see lots of people talking about it, and they say, "Oh, if it was me as a parent, I'd be off doing this, and my daughter would never get involved in that." And it's something that can happen to everyone. I spoke to the local Labour MP, the local Labour head of the council, and the assistant head of the council. I sat in a room with those three people in Rushmore Borough Council offices and spoke about my daughter's plight, about the grooming gangs, about the Somalian girl, about the Muslim local men that were involved in these gangs. The MP seemed horrific. She said this was something that she was going to get in hand, was going to deal with, would be coming back to me for a further chat, would want to talk to me about it. But a wall of silence since. Every time you hit a wall of silence, I believe that higher up, maybe she did want to investigate it. Maybe that's in her heart as the MP. She's a mother of daughters herself, so maybe she did want to investigate it. But I believe that she's probably been shut down. The council have been shut down, but they know about it. They know it goes on. I'm really massively concerned for the local towns we live in, as we have hotels full of unidentified men, mainly from Muslim countries. I've heard of things that have gone on in Aldershot. I've heard of safeguarding issues, even in the hotel, where women mixing with men from these countries have been abused by them. This has been going on in local hotels, and we are bringing more and more of these people into our societies. Grooming gangs has obviously come to the fore in the last few days with what's been going on in Parliament and tweets from America and things, but they still don't seem to be getting to the heart of it, that these victims are young girls, that there's families all across Britain that want to be heard, that need to be heard. We just want people to accept that it goes on. Locally, on Facebook pages, I've had horrendous abuse. I've had local Labour activists calling me a troublemaker, calling me a race baiter, telling me these. One even told me that I was watching too many Russian bots, and that his daughters, he would bring them up well, and they'd never get involved in grooming gangs. I've even had Hope Not Hate do a thing about me. I've run protests against these people coming into the country, and groups like Hope Not Hate dare to actually do a piece about you to tell you that you're racist and not the sort of people we want in our society. Well, I want to tell groups like that they don't frighten me, that I now feel like a voice is beginning to happen for us, and that I will be speaking more and more about this. And if it's a case that we have to bring down governments, we have to bring down councils, it needs to be investigated. The police are complicit in this. They haven't dealt with it. The councils haven't dealt with it. The parliamentarians, whether they're Tory, Labour, Lib Dems, whoever's been in Parliament, knows these things have been going on, and they've covered it up. They need to listen to families. They need to listen to the man in the street, and we need to get to grips with all of this. I'm not far right. I mean, my uncle died fighting what we class as the far right Nazis. My family have actually been. I've always been a traditional Labour voter. I'm a million miles from the far right. I'm just a concerned parent who actually heart weeps for what's happened to this country. And to class people like me as far right is just an abomination. And people like Keir Starmer need to actually come face to face. I would love to sit in a room with that man and him call me far right. I'd love it. He hasn't got a clue. He's just a victim himself of identity politics, and that's all it is. He wants to try and shut us down, but I think this has gone too big now to be shut down. We're not far right, and actually, as we say, we are right. We're not far right. We are right.